man, there's so many albums that have been a huge influence on me, but I'm a list maker, so I have my list. So it's not like I always have the list in the back of my head. The top five for me, the classic albums of all time for me, Pink Floyd's The Wall, probably my number one album of all time. Beatles' Sgt. Pepper, one of the most groundbreaking albums of all time, my favorite band of all time. The Who's Tommy, also a huge, huge album for my childhood and big impact on me growing up. And then the two more, I guess, probably less typical or less predictable ones would be Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and David Bowie's Ziggy Stardust. That's my top five. I think I was around 15 or 16 when I discovered Rush. And that was the defining moment that turned me from this kid that was listening to the Ramones and the Sex Pistols and Kiss and the Who and the Beatles suddenly to a progressive rock fan. And when I discovered Rush and heard Neil Peart's drumming, that's transformed me. And suddenly, from that moment on, I became completely interested in complex music, long songs, odd time signatures, gigantic drum sets. That was the turning point for me. And then from there, I went back, discovered the whole Rush catalog as well as Yes's catalog, Genesis's catalog, and just went headfirst into all things prog. Well, I've now seen prog go through three phases. When I was a child in the 70s and 80s, progressive music was popular. It was on the radio. It was in the mainstream. Bands like Yes and ELP, Jethro Tull, Kansas, Genesis, they were stadium acts. Then, in the beginning of my time with Dream Theater in the 80s and early 90s, prog was a dirty word. And that middle period, the second phase, it was me being in Dream Theater, we were total outcasts. And we had to really fight, to carry the flag and almost excuse ourselves for being progressive. And now here we are in phase three, which has come full circle, and now prog is as popular as ever and has spawned to so many different areas, from progressive metal to progressive punk to progressive pop. These sound like yin and yangs, but they actually work together, and every genre has got bands that have progressive elements that embrace that kind of musicality. So here we are now. It's got its own magazine, its own award show. It's no longer a dirty word. It's here and bigger than ever. The prog stuff that I listen to today is either rooted in the classic sound or rooted in a modern metal sound. The bands that are rooted in the classic sound are bands like Big Elf. I love Big Elf, one of my favorite bands of the last couple of years. I still love the Flower Kings and Pain of Salvation and Spock's Beard, the bands that kind of came around in the 90s and the early 2000s. So those are the prog bands that have that classic sound. Also, Haken's new album, I love their new album. They got that classic prog sound. Then there's the other side of the coin, which is the modern metal sound. The bands like the Safety Fire and Tesseract and Dillinger Escape Plan and Periphery and Animals as Leaders. There's that whole world, which is kind of putting a modern metal spin on prog, and with just musicality that's just off the charts, and musicianship and technicality. So, those are the two sides of the coin of what I listen to these days with new prog bands. That's easy. I have an elephant's brain. I could remember I could do a 3-hour show with Transatlantic one night, then go do a Neil Morse solo show the next night, and then play with the Winery Dogs the next night. I mean, literally. In fact, I did do this. I think a couple of years ago, I played with Avenged Sevenfold, Dream Theater, and Transatlantic, all within the course of like 5 days. And, each obviously with a completely different set list. And I've been blessed or cursed with this elephant's memory that can remember all this stuff. Pompous, extreme, and musical. I could come up with about another 40, but those are the three off the top of my head.